And we are live.
Good morning.
Good morning. Hopefully everyone's showing up. So we'll give it a minute or two. All the students end up kind of popping in. So they're all clicking right now at hopefully 9:58, but also 10:02. So
Right.
all the YouTube here should be popping in.
Does the 10-minute rule still apply? Like if I went to class and the teacher didn't show up in the first 10 minutes, like I just left. And so like
yeah.
If the students don't come in the first 10 minutes, they're just not coming.
Yeah. They're all popping in. There they are.
Yep.
We got all the students on the YouTube side, and then like my mother-in-law will be on the Facebook side.
Yeah.
Heather Jones, Taryn. Yeah, we have a good group. We got, as usual, so 18 students, 19 students. We got one or two that watch at another time because they're in lab. This allows me to kind of overlap a little bit too, right? So I got one student who's in A&P, but she's taking a class. She watches it later. So just looking at the names too, we have a golfer, a couple soccer players, a couple basketball players. So a good mix probably out of the 18. We probably got 13, 14 student athletes here. They run through names. So yeah, it's a good mix. And it's a little different. And maybe we can ask you, get them to comment a little bit on this, but because of COVID, the training kind of things we'll talk about in your gym that they're facing the same thing as far as how many can go into the performance center. We opened up, so this Anytime Fitness, next door, is finally gone, and they converted it into a performance training center. So, so Sites is in there. He's got all Rogue equipment. He's got fancy little logos on like everything. Even the barbell's got a logo. Right? So,
man, I need some of that.
I know it. Trust me, tell me. But yeah. So anyway, cool. Michael is here with his awesome. Thanks for being creative, Michael. Use another word other than here. All right. So we'll get started. I'll count through everybody as we're getting started here. But without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and do this because if James, this is James Harris. Well, last time we popped into Brentwood Barbell, we were hoping to get James, but we were blessed with Alex. I actually asked Alex to talk because he was an alumni.
He's a good guy.
And as I said, everything's crazy with COVID right now. It's hard to find observation hours. It's hard to find internship hours. But 3 students, Devin, Alex, are those your only 2? Did you have one other as far as interning with you? Anyway, James at Brentwood.
Yeah, just those 2.
Okay. Yep. So Alex, who we talked to before, did his internship. So remember, your junior, probably your senior year, you'll do a 1-semester internship at a location. So Brentwood Barbell, James allows that opportunity and has improved it each time. So Alex was able to get on right at the right time. He's on as a full-time coach. So we talked to Alex last time the entire time. We were hoping to get James on, so we thought we'd have him back. Talk a little bit more about business, systems, work-life balance, being a business owner, gym owner during the crazy COVID times and everything else. So if you have any questions, comments, throw them up at any time. And we'll rock and roll from there. So I can throw your slides up too. James always comes out and talks to our class, but we can do that.
Let's do that.
All right. So, so James, career as an exercise science professional, James Harris. So what does MPT mean? So talk a little bit about MPT. These students are all looking into DPT schools.
Yep. So, I went into physical therapy school at Maryville University, and I came in. That program is a freshman to now DPT degree. When I entered, it was a freshman to MPT, which is a master's degree in physical therapy. And so I transitioned from SIU Edwardsville into the Maryville program. And so I got kind of a little bit later start, but I was officially the last master's group from Maryville University. So that's the MPT part.
Okay. And then as far as, this is your introduction, right? So you're a father, you're a husband. Is this kind of like your priority list here? Is this kind of what's most important?
Yeah, I mean, that's, I guess maybe they're not in necessarily the order of importance, although certainly father and husband would be at the top, but probably more passionate or more self-identify as a business owner than a physical therapist at this point. Certainly a physical therapist by trade, and a lot of our business systems and procedures are based off of that knowledge and that experience. But I don't tell people I'm a PT. I tell them I own a business. So that's really a big deal for me, and it's taken a while to get here. And it's the hardest job that you'll ever love, probably, if it's something that you're into.
Nice. We can buzz along and then kind of
Yep,
go off
yep.
on tangents. All right. So, and this is what we just talked about. So James and I, before we went live, we were just talking about kind of where you all are as freshmen, as sophomore. We have a couple students that are kind of coming back. So kind of similar to your experience, I think that, maybe they went to junior college, they went out and got into the workforce. Now they're thinking maybe go back to school. So they're in their mid-20s, upper 20s, things like that. So they're kind of wrapping their head around what this degree looks like, what the future looks like, what a career can look like. So
yeah, it's they're asking you to decide this stuff at a younger and younger age. If you'll notice there on my education list, you'll see Bachelor of Science twice, and that's because I finished at Edwardsville before I really had a pretty strong game plan. And so when I decided that I wanted to be a physical therapist, I couldn't get into a professional only program, which at the time was WashU. I just didn't get in. And so I also applied to SLU and Maryville, which were both kind of this freshman through professional program. So luckily I got into Maryville, but it also meant that I had to backtrack and I had to complete the third year of their program, which was the final undergrad year. And then transition into their professional, which is at the time was years 4 and 5. And so that was just the cost of me not knowing sooner, right? And so that was kind of a bummer, but that's what I did, and it ended up working out just fine. But they want you to have life figured out. It seems at a pretty young age. So
sure.
that's tough.
So you had about 4 levels of figuring out life, and then about 5 or 6 years after getting out.
I'm still working on it.
That's what I was going to say. And after you felt pretty good about life, that it all changed up again.
Yeah.
All right. Any thought on, I had this from a parent as far as kinesiology versus exercise science, purely marketing, purely a reason why you're going to call it a bachelor's of science in kinesiology versus exercise science. I'm just pointing to this former education slide. I had a parent ask me that the other day. She actually almost looked at, actually someone in class maybe looked at Quincy maybe. And then
yeah. So that's an interesting question. I know when I was in that program at Edwardsville, at the time they were sending lots of those students to, they had a graduate anatomy and physiology program, like a professional A&P program.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if that terminology just matches that professional degree more effectively. Because the kines part of things is obviously the study of human movement and bones and levers and whatnot. And I don't know if that just sort of more tailored to those students, in terms of just terminology. I would venture to, I don't know. I guess that's a great question. Which one is sort of more marketable? My interpretation of the situation would be kind of like what we were talking about, is it's a pre-professional generalist sort of degree. And the idea is to explore lots of topics and concepts that will help you, I think, narrow your choices.
Sure.
So I would probably at this point be more like partial to the exercise science terminology.
Sure. Just kind of going into the science. It's the science of exercise, the science of movement. Yeah. At my welcoming dinner, I came on full time 2-3 years ago. The now president of the university stopped me on the way out the door and said, "Hey, Dave." And I turned around. He says, "Why do we call it exercise science? Why not kinesiology?" This is like as I'm walking out of his house, the last thing of the night, But I pulled something pretty good out of my ear.
Well, that's good. That's good.
But for that same reason. So, all right. So employment opportunities, and this is whether you're talking about graduating the day you get out of undergraduate or the day you get out of graduate school, or these are kind of evolving opportunities that you're seeing, right? So what are your options here?
Yeah. So, when I finished Edwardsville, I could have gone to this professional A&P program or transition into physical therapy school. And most of the people were going to the A&P program. It was cheaper. It was on the same campus. And so it was just sort of assumed that you would apply to that program. But I don't know. I didn't necessarily want to spend my time primarily doing research, and poring over articles and data. That stuff is interesting to me, but I appreciate sort of being around people and working with people and helping people in a more, I guess, direct manner. So for me, physical therapy was, the obvious next step. And so that's what I went with, and this is always the tough question, if like, do I need to be a physical therapist to own a gym at this point? Well, the answer is obviously no. I would argue that, I have maybe a skill set that others might not have, and it might open some opportunities that others might not have privilege to. But, because I was I honestly just took so long figuring it out, that was the path that I took. But these, I had this list originally when I graduated, from Edwardsville. This was the list. The list never changed, and so I just sort of made my way down the list.
Sure. All right, let's look here. So, kind of brief snapshot before we get into what you have going on at Brentwood Barbell. And again, I think to look at a slide like this isn't as much we call it. I mean, and James calls it employment history, but it really is a path that you may take. And as James and I talked about before we got on live, is that there's a pretty conventional path that that if you can finish up your 3-4 years here, and if you're set on, let's say, occupational therapy or physical therapy, you can do 4 years here, and through that process in our pre-PT program, that you go into a DPT program. If that's 3 years in, and then you're getting out and you can go to an Athletico, you can go to Apex. And it's a pretty conventional, kind of straightforward. As I told James, we kind of know the next 6, 7, 8 years of your life, assuming that you're locked in, you're studying hard, and you're getting your work done, you're networking, you're doing all the other required things. So James, when he has employment history here, it's a little bit more of his journey and kind of how he wrapped his head around and how he wants to work with people in that. So we could talk about this a little bit.
Yeah, well, to be honest, I thought I was locked in, and I got into different sort of areas and thought either there was something I didn't like or enjoy, or there was something I thought I could do better. The outpatient orthopedics, which is the sports and physical therapy center, I got really just bombarded with having to care for tons and tons of people and move people very quickly through, for lack of a better term, sort of a cookie cutter model. A lot of the conditions are treated similarly, and you just sort of run through lots of patients. The clinic has to make money, and so you've got to see a lot of people to do that. And so I didn't necessarily love that. And I also had a tough time with the insurance model at the time. I was still personal training, and I couldn't understand why I could go to the gym and collect, $65 to $70 from somebody right there that night, cash, versus seeing somebody in the clinic and had to sign 7 different documents and send off paperwork, stating that I had, worked with someone and collect, at the time, less money. And it just sort of, I was like, well, that's odd. And I don't know that I love that. And so that led me to the cash model. And that was great. But then I started to learn, well, if I thought about care in terms of a more preventative term or sense, then maybe I could work with people and design programs that I thought were, more effective or better or whatever. And maybe I could prevent some of these soft tissue injuries that I was seeing so much in the clinic. So each step was kind of gave me some insight into that. And then I took that information and said, well, okay, but what do I want to do with that? And it just sort of led me to this path where, now I own a gym and we try to put together programming for people that works for them, and we try to do the best job we can. And all of that stuff is kind of baked into that process. But It was a lot of steps getting there.
And I think as a PT, you're able to kind of get into the sports physical therapy center. Richmond Heights is just sort of a side job to make some money while you're at Maryville. But I think as far as kind of, and then meeting me was pretty amazing, part of your career journey. But I think as far as, and again, I think the students are thinking about this, where if you want to be a gym owner, can you graduate and then go be a gym owner at 23? Like, what are you doing from 23 to 28? And I think as far as maybe the security or some of the path goes, you can see where a physical therapist can come into play as far as working with people. But I think that's all the more reason to go observe, to go intern, go get a job. I've talked to a few more of you about being a physical therapy technician. I know Henny's doing that. We have someone who's enjoyed that up in Florissant and Hazelwood area. I know that, I'm going to talk to maybe Julie today about that, as far as getting into being a technician, checking out the environment, working with different PTs, seeing what a day in the life is really like, aside from talking to people. But
Yeah. Yeah, I had to do a ton of those types of hours, as part of getting into those programs. But to be honest with you, I also did a handful of sites that I just took upon myself to do. I would call the place and say, "Hey, I want to follow you. I want to observe." And most of the time, if someone is showing that kind of initiative, most places are receptive. I know now the time right now is a little weird. Everybody's counting the number of people in their building at any given time, but generally speaking, if you reach out to someone and they're in one of those professions, they're probably going to be receptive to introducing you to what they do, or at least talking to you about it.
Sure. All right. So this next slide I'm going to throw up is kind of the difference. You mentioned it just a minute ago. When we talk about third party billing, that's essentially, and a lot of you know this, if you're an athlete, you get hurt, you're going to go to a physical therapist. If you work with Stuart now, our athletic trainer, he's going to work on your ankle, and it's just kind of part of being a student athlete here. If you go to Athletico, then you're going to use your insurance. It's going to be billed to your insurance company. The insurance company is going to pay the entire bill or some of the bill. And so we call that a third party bill. The first party is you. The second party is the physical therapist. The third party is some other entity in insurance. So we talk a lot about insurance billing, third party billing, but how that changes the industry. So this next slide is a little bit more about kind of difference between traditional physical therapy versus contemporary PT. You called it cash-based PT. So for your students who are kind of looking into this field and different options you have, can you talk a little bit about that or what you have here?
Yeah, so certainly the traditional PT route is, by far the more common route. It's it's kind of like you were saying, Dave. It's that very laid out roadmap, right? I go to school, I graduate, I work in outpatient orthopedics, or maybe I work in the neuro unit at the hospital, whatever that is. But it's very traditional, and it's what most people that go to PT anyways. That's what most people are gonna end up doing, and that's certainly what I did. I sort of found that I didn't love the volume aspect of that route. You really got to see a lot of people. The reimbursement in that model is not optimal, and so it forces you to really work with a lot of people versus saying, "Hey, I'm going to charge more. I'm going to see less people, and I'm going to provide at least what I feel to be a more effective or impactful service." We're actually talking about this at our gym right now and how much we charge for different memberships. But the idea would be that, if you can charge more and you can, obviously you need the clientele, but if you can charge more, you can spend more time and give that person more attention. And so your treatment, your programming, whatever it is better. It's more tailored to that individual. And so you spend a little less time chasing, I need more people, and you spend a little bit more time with your current people. And the idea being that they're going to be more likely to refer to you. They're going to have a better success story. They're going to be more of a raving fan, so to speak. And it's all built on the personal sort of attention and care. It's just incredibly difficult to do in that traditional model because you're just really working your butt off trying to get from one patient to the next.
Yeah. That's so direct access. Can you describe what direct access means? Because that's different. So we have a lot of students in from different places as well. I know Illinois a little bit, maybe some West Coast. I know some of my other students that have Texas, et cetera.
Yeah.
Right? So what's the difference? And I know it's different per state. So talk about direct access.
So depending on where some of those guys are at, they may actually be in a state that has direct access. And basically what that's going to mean is the athlete or the person who has the injury is able to go directly to their local physical therapist or the person they trust and say, "Hey, here's the deal. I want you to help me." And the direct portion of that ranges from, okay, the PT has full direct access, meaning they can take any patient and it's at their discretion on who they're going to treat and who they're not. And that range, that'll range all the way down to some states have like a partial direct, which would, for example, would be something like, well, if it's a pre-existing injury and it's within the last 6 months and there's all these stipulations that you got to check these boxes and say, okay, I can see you for that injury. But, if your back suddenly started hurting out of nowhere and you have, night pains and you're 62, I need to refer you to the physician or whatever, because we're checking a different set of boxes now. And so Missouri does not have direct access. They have been saying for a long time that it's in the works, but we don't have it. Some states do, and I never gave that really much thought when I was in school. I just, again, was going to go to a clinic and be a PT, and those. The neat thing about that is that people just show up. I didn't have to do anything.
Right.
And so when I decided that I wanted to do some things on my own and open a business, they don't just show up. And so the direct access thing is a big deal. So if someone is a little bit more entrepreneurial and have this sort of feeling that like one day they might want to do their own thing, then the direct access issue is something that needs to be sort of thought about. And how would that affect maybe your ability to operate? Would you like that? Would you not like that? There are pros and cons. You're going to be, if you don't have direct access, you're still going to be pulling patients from physicians, even if you're charging cash rather than insurance.
Right.
And so that's a big deal. And I just, no one talked about it when I was in school. So
sure.
Definitely it's more, you're hearing that term more and more now, and it's something I would really think about in terms of your, what level of entrepreneurial sort of interest you have. And if it's high, then really think on that.
Because we have a Logan in the area, a lot of students will go to Logan Chiropractic.
Yep.
So kind of transitioning into that a little bit, or there may be some similarities with that direct access feel. I know you've mentioned that in the past. The idea between chiropractor. Yeah.
So without, getting super, political about the whole PT chiropractic issue, honestly, if I were going back to school today, I would look more closely at chiropractic school because of this direct access. They can see patients. You can just go to your local chiropractor and say, here's what's wrong. And, it's at their discretion to say, yep, I can help, or no, you need to go. This is something else. You need to go see a physician. And they have that ability here in Missouri. And, at one time, I think they had a little bit, they being chiropractors, had a little bit more difficulty getting third-party reimbursement for some of their coding and their charges. I have heard, this was 10 years ago, but I have heard that they have since that's sort of smoothed out a little bit. And honestly, a lot of them charge cash at this point anyway. So I don't think that that's something that they're sweating a whole lot. They can still bill for things like therapeutic exercise, and some of the coding is similar to what a PT would bill for, but they have that direct access sort of component. And I don't know, knowing what I know now and my desire to sort of just come and see me, I'll talk to you, we'll work it out, we can handle it. And knowing that I'm comfortable with that now, I probably would have looked more closely at that school.
Here's a good question from Henny. So Henny, a soccer player here, he's a PT, works as a technician. I'll throw up on the screen. And I mention this a lot as an athletic trainer. I did not like the career of an athletic trainer, but I love the skill and knowledge. It's really helped me as a personal trainer. But can you see that?
Yeah, I can. That's a good question. It's difficult to answer in an absolute sense. The obvious.
Let me read that real quick. Some people are watching on their phone in that. So Henny asked, do you ever feel like you're getting your master's in physical therapy wasn't worthwhile because you are more of a business owner now? Do you still use your PT knowledge and skills in your business daily? Great question, Henny.
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. And that is, I have asked myself this many times, and I had many discussions with people about it. It's difficult because the obvious is, well, I paid a fair amount of money to go to school, and I'm not doing the thing that I said I was going to do. However, it's complicated because I don't want to sort of spin anyone around and make them crazy. But what is physical therapy, right? Is it the script? Is that physical therapy, or is physical therapy, working with people in a non-invasive exercise-based way to either prevent or rehabilitate, pathology or issues? And so when you sort of step out of it a little bit, I would argue that I'm a PT every day. It's just at a different point in the sort of athlete spectrum, right? We're trying to come in and we're going to catch them on the front end where maybe we're looking more at body composition and muscle weakness, and maybe they have poor general flexibility, whatever the case. but we're trying to work with them in a way and put together exercise programs for them that will put them in a place down the road where, they are stronger, they have better body composition, they have better aerobic fitness, and are thus much less likely to find themselves in a quote traditional PT setting. So in that sense, I feel like I am a PT every single day. The other thing, from a owning a business perspective, we get people that will email us or fill out our coaching sort of form because I'm a PT, and they will say, hey, I heard that this is what you do and this is your model. Sometimes they might be done with traditional PT, or they may just be trying to avoid it altogether, but they'll come in and we'll get some of those folks just because I am a physical therapist. And then the last thing that I'll say where I feel like having this skill set is valuable is owning a business requires systems, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. But one of the systems is, how do you coach? So all of the coaches at my gym coach in the same way. We all use the same sort of physical model on how we teach the lifts. We all use the same general programming model in terms of how we work with clients. And so that knowledge and that skill set really helped me take that and package that in a way that a brand new coach could sit down with our binder and say, oh, this is kind of how you do it. Right. And so the business relies more on my skill set and me effectively delivering that to my coaches, who then can deliver it to our clients. And if I didn't have that, I don't know. I think it would be difficult or maybe more challenging to kind of work with the coaches in this sort of top-down way that allows them to have a system where our service is reproducible across, all of our staff. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because ideally, and even in a physical therapy clinic, you'd like to think you don't just have 7 different therapists doing 7 different systems and 7 different
like to.
Right? That even in a PT clinic, you get, like if you go to this particular place, I don't know, Athletico, and I know that Athletico is just a big one in St. Louis we mentioned a lot because they took over per rehab. But speaking of, this is a good transition because you talked about kind of systems in that. So this next slide, check it out. So as far as being a gym owner, a business owner, when being a good coach isn't enough, you can break down a little bit of the E-Myth, kind of idea. I mentioned that sometime in careers, and I will next week when we meet. But
so the E-Myth is really a book about how to franchise your business, right? And so you sort of myth. The entrepreneur myth. So the idea is that people open businesses because they're good at something. And you're like, I'm an amazing coach, or I make awesome cookies, or whatever it is. And so they just open this business. And they don't really know, first, they don't know how to do the other parts of the business, right? So how to market, how to do administrative stuff, and all of that kind of stuff. But then also, if they actually get to a point where they've figured some of those things out, if they don't have the systems and procedures written down in a way that can be, reproducible, they can never leave that business, right? Because if I'm the only guy that knows how to coach, and I walk out the door at 3:00 in the afternoon, and I have a coach here, and they're doing whatever they want, our clients are not going to love that. They're not going to have the same experience, and so the quality is more difficult to maintain. And so the idea really is, if you can write down what you do, you're essentially sort of cloning yourself, right? To an acceptable degree. Certainly our coaches here have their own personalities and their own interests, and clients will work with coaches because, of those sort of personality traits. And that's 100% fine. Like, you're not, some people will say, well, it makes you very robotic, and that's not the idea at all. The idea is to make you very comfortable with your task list, so that then your personality can shine, right, so that you can spend time being you. But we have this backdrop of like, here's the 5 things my client needs from me on a weekly basis.
Sure.
Right. And so they can spend less time, being anxious about that kind of stuff, and more time just being, a good coach and communicating, which is the second bullet there, is the communication skill. Our coaches here are in almost. Say that again.
How have you worked on that as far as your communication skills versus 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and then how do you quote unquote train your coaches?
Yeah. So, well, from the training perspective, we meet all the time. So we talk a lot about what we're implementing, and I'll pass along things that I think are interesting. And it's sort of, whenever we bring a new idea into the business, it isn't me saying, here's what we're doing. It might be me saying, here's this idea or this concept. how does this fit with what we're currently doing? And so it's a little bit more open table sort of format when we introduce something, whether it's a programming concept or a check-in, whatever that is. But the biggest thing from a communication standpoint that I have learned that I didn't know when I started is clients, customers, athletes don't care as much about what you know until they really know more that you care about them. They want to know that you're giving them a certain amount of attention. They want to know that you are really invested in them as a person. And, when I started as a PT or as a coach, I could talk to you all day long about the origin, insertion, action, innervation of almost every muscle in the body. And I remember at one point thinking I was so cool because I knew all of that stuff. Like, this is such great knowledge. No one cares, right? It's stuff that you have to know, but no one cares where the lateral hamstring inserts to on the ischial tuberosity. No one cares about that. They care about their back pain or their hip pain. And they care that you care about that. And so the way that we talk to clients is more personal. It's less technical, right? Now, again, you have to know those things, but I was very technically oriented when I first started coaching and doing PT because that's what I knew, right? You got to start somewhere. And as you coach and work with people and, honestly lose some people and mess up a bunch of times, you start to figure out, well, gosh, like this other person had a great experience. This person didn't. What's the difference? Oh, I invested in them more, or I was just more human with them, or it's like, what, I get it. Like, let's work on this together. And those are some of the big takeaways is whatever I can do to facilitate that type of discussion. And also how can I get the athlete or the client to communicate with me? Like, what can I do to get them to buy in and have some skin in the game, so to speak? Those are big points. And the athletes or clients that do that are the ones that stay with us, indefinitely.
Yeah. And I've had people say that, like, I only like to work with motivated people. I only like to work with people who are driven,
Well,
and it's, how that is. So it's, it's nice to get someone to come in ready to rock and roll 3 times a week and they have a goal and it's all set up for them, but it's so rewarding.
It is fantastic, but I will tell you that by and large, the general public is not internally motivated to exercise.
Yeah.
Now, wherever they're at on that spectrum of behavioral change, you got to meet them there. And that might be, they don't know that they should exercise, all the way down to, well, they know, but they have an accountability sort of thing going on. Or maybe they had a bad experience. And so you've got to find out where they're at on that spectrum. But by and large, you've got to really, you got to do your part to help them be motivated, and so that's a big part of the job.
So here's a question in your Field of Dreams comment. So James and I met working together at the Richmond Heights Community Center. We were both personal trainers there. He was in Maryville getting his master's degree. And then I began, when we did a lot of things together. We did a lot of weight loss programs. We did boot camps. We did, all kinds of things. We had a lot of fun. I eventually moved on to Webster Groves Recreation Complex, and then James started working out of a CrossFit gym and things like that. But at one point, he decided, I'm going to go open a gym. So he went and rented some space, opened the doors, and knew from watching classic Field of Dreams Kevin Costner that if you build it, they will come. So is that what happened? You built your 3,000 square feet, and they just started flying?
Well, yes and no. Some people did, but it takes longer than that movie might have you believe. It depends on the type of business that you're trying to build. So if you think about like a big, like Globo type gym, which would be like a 24-hour fitness or a club fitness or something like that, their strategies for reaching potential clients are going to be on a much broader scale. They're going to be more digital. It's a volume sort of thing, right? Where our gym is, I guess you would classify as like a micro gym. It's not a CrossFit gym, but it's, comparable in size and membership. And so our relationships with clients are more personal, they're more connected. And so we get the bulk of our clients from existing clients. I'm actually working with a guy right now to implement a more effective internal referral system in the gym because there's a whole bunch of psychology and data behind this, but generally speaking, like people hang out with people they're like, right? And so if you have a client that is a great client for you and they refer someone to you, it's likely that person would be a great client as well. At least more likely than if you just picked up somebody off of Facebook randomly and said, "Hey, I saw your gym. I want to come in and check it out." So that's a little bit more hit or miss, right? Whereas you'd like to think that a referral from, that client that's in your 5:30 class 4 days a week without fail and has done great. They've lost weight. They've gotten stronger. They're going to refer a friend who, at a minimum, wants those things too.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it sort of just opens the door more quickly. And the idea there is that you get a little more invested client out of that. But it takes a while, right? I mean, we're 4 years in, and we pre-COVID had worked up to, we were knocking on the door of 90 members at the gym. 87, I think, is where we were. And then COVID hit, and we got down to like 41 or 42. And then it was real rough. And then we started to very slowly climb back. And then I did the unthinkable and actually increased our rates. And it was terrifying. I thought, well, we're going to go back down to 42.
Right.
But the reason that I did that is because we were not in a position where I couldn't wait. It was either have a hard conversation with our clients or have a hard conversation with my landlord. And I just was at a point where this has to work, or we're just going to pack up.
And your wife?
And it worked. It worked. Every single person came on. I picked up the phone and made 63 phone calls. Personal phone calls.
Did you really? Yeah.
Yeah. I wrote down a little paragraph and I read that 63 times. And every single person went for it.
Wow. You didn't do the memo? You didn't just hand out a memo? You didn't hand out the brochure and say this is the way it is?
I didn't. And here's
that's impressive, brother. That really is. That's cool.
So here's why, and I'll tell you real quick why I did that. And this is a little business thing that maybe someday will help one of you guys. A really smart guy once told me that if you're going to change the product or service or price, you can't take a step back in personal connection. So if we always emailed clients, then it would have been acceptable to email them. But we see them every day. We talk to them every day. So it felt impersonal to send out an email blast saying, here's what we're doing. And so I needed to have a conversation with them because that's our typical level of interaction is conversation. And I didn't do it in the gym because that's a little awkward and you're trying to coach. So the next best thing was just calling them. And so I called every single person. Nice. And it went fine. Everyone was like, yeah, absolutely. I get it. We want you guys to do well. We love it there. And everything was great. But man, that was stressful. I'm not going to lie. Every single phone call, my stomach was in knots.
Oh, I bet. Oh, yeah.
And you start I started with the easy ones. I'm like, oh, these are some home runs. I know this guy's going to go. And then as you start working down that list, you're like, oh, this doesn't feel good. And it's just by the end of that list, I'm like, I don't know, this person's probably not going to go for it. Luckily they did. But
sure. And we have another question for you, but I know, you and I have talked about this a lot in the past, but go to my wife or people ask about going into personal training, like it's not like you just have one supervisor or one employer. Every client is your employer. And so if you're going to get a pay raise, I love when when Mercy calls and they do an annual review and say, you get a 2.8% raise, great job. And it's a stressful meeting for my wife and she has to go through all these things, but she just gets raised and it's awesome versus I have to go to Judy and Bruce and I got to talk to every single one of them and explain to them why I'm going to ask for more money. Is something going to change? And I can't just say, hey, I want to go buy another house. I'm having another kid. Therefore, I'm going to charge you more for training because I'm going to have another baby. So there's a lot of things, taken into account. But let me ask you.
Go ahead.
Let me just question real quick. Michael asked a question about adherence. So you got a little bit into motivation and stuff. So when we talk about kind of what things we do to motivate your clients, your members, what ways do you express or emphasize, most important in maintaining motivation?
Yeah. So it depends where they're at in that spectrum. So the vast majority of clients that come to us have exercised before. So they know that exercise is important. They've heard plenty about, weight loss and the importance of, having an appropriate body composition and all of that kind of stuff. So we generally will get people coming in that are already aware of the importance of what we do. So that part of the puzzle is typically already laid down for us. They might not understand why we work with clients in the way that we do, which was it's sort of a basic barbell sort of approach. And so we might have to start there with some education and explain to them why we feel like that's a great way to work with them. But what we start doing out of the gate is we start engaging with them in a way that puts them in control of their training, right? So not to get too much in the weeds here, but like, for example, let's say you're training and you have a client and you say, well, I wrote up this 8-week program and it starts with 4 sets of 8 at 68%, and then it's going to go all the way down to doubles at 87% 8 weeks later, and that's the program. And at the end of that program, we're going to test you, and it'll be great. And you're going to do this and that. That's fantastic, right? There's a lot of knowledge there. There's a lot of power there, but we work with folks in a way that sort of engages them a little bit more on a daily basis, in terms of like using more of a RPE, or rating of perceived exertion kind of scale. And so that's a really fancy way of saying that we help them through conversation and through what we're learning training, how to put the appropriate weight on the bar for the day, right? The toughest question in the weight room is always, and if you've ever coached or when you start coaching, is, well, how much should I lift? Well, how hard should that be? And so we're trying to teach folks what an effective training session should feel like, right? Now that's a believe it or not, a big task, and it requires lots of conversation and lots of reiteration of the same sort of principles and topics. But something interesting happens in that clients start engaging with that information, and they come in with like a plan for the day. Well, I'm supposed to do 3 sets of 5 at RPE 8, and based on last week, this is what I'm thinking. Immediately they're bought in, right? So if we get someone doing that, we have them in terms of buy-in. And so because they're more personally invested in the process and they feel like they have some control, we also work with them on a way where we might put together the program, like the template version or component of the program, in a way that they enjoy. Right. So if somebody likes a little bit of accessory work at the end of their strength work, we'll put that in. That's fine.
Right? Girls for girls,
Absolutely, right? I don't care if somebody wants to curl 3 times a week. If they're squatting twice a week, I don't care. It's great. We're all there. So.
Dan John said that the other day for his high school athletes, he does not program any barbell bench or bicep curls, because he's like, they're going to do them. We give them 20 minutes at the end of a workout, and they're going to do those. So
it'll find its way into the program. And so we started doing a lot more of that in the last couple of years, and our client like satisfaction went up a ton, right? They're like, wow, I feel like this is kind of my program. I feel like you're really paying attention to me. And generally speaking, people like to, this is a funny conversation topic, but they like to sweat when they exercise, right? They feel productive when they sweat. And we used to have this conversation where it's like, well, sweating doesn't necessarily mean progress and getting stronger, and it's a whole sort of abstract kind of thing. And that's true. It is absolutely true. But if you're going to own a business, you have to be able to sell the product, right? And if somebody doesn't want the product because they're not sure about it, it's more difficult to sell. And so it's like, well, what is the greater good here? If I can let them do 15 minutes of 4 exercises that maybe they don't need 100%, but that 15 minutes is going to get them to come in and do the exercises that we feel are very important for them, then it's okay, right? It's totally fine. And if their approval rating, so to speak, is high, they're coming back. And that's really the big deal. So if we can find a program put together in a way that they enjoy, it's obvious, right? You're going to do what you like more often.
Right.
So that's a big deal. You got to be willing. And I struggled with this personally. It's not about me. It's not about me being this type of coach or using this type of system. And that sounds like a, well, duh kind of idea right there, but you will struggle with it. I promise you.
And as much as you like to work out, you're doing this for kind of a different reason, or really reflecting on the idea that how you feel when you move more and you feel a little better, and you genuinely want to share that with other people, but it really becomes about that other person. All right, 2 questions just popped up. So one of them, and I got a sweet little slide for you. So Addison asks, what does a typical day look like, and how many clients do you see daily? So check it out, little cheat sheet here. So this was a typical Monday session from our schedule from a year ago. I think it was a year ago.
It's a couple at this point, but yeah. Well, yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Here's a day in the life of James. Welcome to James, his wife Megan, and 2 beautiful daughters. That's family.
It's a long day. But when I started the gym, I didn't have enough money to hire anyone else. I didn't start with capital. I had no investors. I didn't go to the bank and borrow money. It was just me with the money that I had saved over the past, handful of years. And so that was basically, I had enough to buy equipment. That was it. And so I was the coach, I was, the custodian, I was the programmer, I was the admin, and I still am a fair amount of these things. My day doesn't necessarily, I think I have another slide here in a bit that's a little more tolerable, but this is what you sign up for, at least in the beginning when you start a business, unless you just have a pile of cash that you're bringing into that business, which is, not what most of us have. So you gotta be willing to put in some sweat equity on the front end. And again, this is if you build it, there will come part. You're going to probably have to put it in longer than you think you're going to have to put it in. So I did that schedule for over a year when I first started.
Hey, speaking of your wonderful wife, she just chimed in and said hello. So,
Nice.
there she is. All right. So here's another. So along the same lines, this might be the other kind of company positions. We'll run through a couple of these slides, a couple of these questions. But Heather Joan asks, how did you start the process of opening a gym, gathering money, lease space, et cetera? What stage were you able to? And I think that speaks to being at a gym, maybe building up a clientele, saving a little cash on the side, deciding when will these clients move with me. But can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. That's a great question. And there's a couple things that are really important. One is just that I had been at the gym that I was at for a while, and I had put together a list of clients that were willing to come with me, right? And that list, I was fairly full in terms of like personal training hours a week. I was probably, it's been a while, but I was probably around 30. So that's a decent week in terms of personal training. And
30 personal training sessions.
Yeah. And so I don't know how many clients that was. I saw a lot of them twice, but somewhere around there. And I actually went to all of them personally, and I said, hey, here's what I'm thinking. Would you be willing to make this leap with me? And they, across the board, they said yes. I think everybody came except maybe one client or maybe two, but most of them did. And I had been saving for a while. My wife and I had talked about opening a gym, and she was very supportive of that, which will bring me to my next point here in a second. But we were sort of pinching our pennies, and then I got this list of clients, and then we had to start looking for a space. And so the reason I said I'll get to that in a second is, I wasn't making any money, right? By the time, at my initial gym, I had these clients, I paid very little overhead. I was making a decent salary. The minute I had to buy equipment, the minute I had to pay rent, the minute I had insurance, the minute I had all of these things, my salary was, almost zero. So go back to that slide with all those hours, all that stuff that I was doing, and imagine doing that for maybe $200 a week, right? And so the reason that I mention that is because I didn't do this on my own, right? I couldn't have done this without help. And obviously my wife was an enormous help. Like, she had a great job that allowed me to take this leap. So I didn't just like throw caution to the wind and say, well, I'm great, it's going to be great. I did a bunch of calculating on the front end, but at the end of the day, if I didn't have people helping me and if I didn't have that support, I would have been sleeping at the gym, right? I would have been sleeping in my car. Would I have done that anyways? I don't know, maybe, because I really wanted to open a gym, but that is something to think about. If you're really going to try that, you got to do some homework, and you got to lean on some people that you trust, and that you got to have some people in your corner to help you do this thing.
You got to know your why. So let me say something real quick. So we got a minute or two left. If anyone, I did speech therapy as a child for a couple of years. If anyone has to get to a class, you got to run across campus, go ahead and get out of here. It's 10:50. One thing, we're going to meet in the studio next Wednesday at 10 a.m. So I'll see you all in person at the studio at 10 a.m. We're going to talk for a couple more minutes, though, because I do want to get to Haley's question. And then I'm meeting with a couple of you at 11 o'clock anyway. So let's finish a point or two. I want to get to Haley's question and then rock and roll. Although this point about knowing your why, Why do you want to become a physical therapist? Well, we will talk about that a little bit more this semester, understanding why you want to help people. Why do you want to help people in the context of physical therapy versus their accounting versus their cleaning versus their training, different things, whatever. So, but let's jump in. I just want to get all the questions for sure. As far as Haley asks, why while you were in college, did you take any classes, for business? Did you learn all these skills? Like, how you pick up your business skills, your knowledge? Where are you learning stuff,
So I definitely took 0 business classes. The thing about PT curriculum, physical therapy curriculum, is that it is jam-packed full of physical therapy. Like, you are in school, it's basically 8 to 5, 5 days a week, with a few of those days being more like 8 to 8 because you have labs and stuff like that. And that is all technician oriented stuff. That is all how to be a physical therapist, how to stretch people, what muscles do what pathologies look like, how to diagnose, all of that kind of stuff. We talked 0 about how to how to improve a profit margin or what a profit margin even was. So I didn't know any of that kind of stuff. And I did the thing that a lot of people do. I thought that I would just open a business, and because I knew those things, that everything else would take care of itself. And that is not the case. You have to start picking up other skill sets, or you have to have money to pay someone to do them, one or the other, but you can't not do them. And so my path was, and still is, I'm learning as much as I can on my own. Some of the things I've started doing, or one of the things I started doing more recently, is I have placed a much higher value on relationships and connections. So I am trying actively to network my butt off with people that have been there and done that, with people that have successful businesses, run gyms, sold gyms. I want to know everything they know, or as much as they're willing to share with me. And I'll do it. I'll be annoying. I don't care, because I need to know these things for my business to succeed. And that's the know your why part. I really believe that we're doing important things. I really believe that we're having an impact on people. And if this business doesn't succeed, then I can't have that impact. And if my goal is to have that impact, I have to stay open. I have to be profitable. There are also other people depending on me to be profitable. My family needs money, and all of these things are in that mix. But it all starts with we have to stay in business, and I believe that. So it'll drive you to work your butt off. It'll drive you to read as many books as you can get your hands on. It'll drive you to talk to as many people that will tolerate you. And if you're not up for that, or that sounds annoying or tedious or boring, don't open a gym.
Right. And speaking of your gym, Nick wants to know, do you guys hold any powerlifting events? You got anything coming up? Or
Yeah, fantastic question, Nick. We actually have one, the USPA Missouri State Championships, slated for January 30th, assuming that the world sort of stays where it's at or doesn't revert back to shutting down. That is scheduled for the 30th. This is the 3rd year we have hosted that. It has grown every year. It's about, I think, 3/4 full in terms of lifters. Last year was a little bit different. Last year it sold out in like 5 days. So we're sort of feeling the COVID thing on that. But I think by the time it gets here, I think it'll be a pretty full meet. We love that meet. Our new space is much bigger. And so one of our folks start coming out and going back to the gyms is host more informal or non-sanctioned meets. Like that's a sanctioned meet. So if you go to that meet, you compete. Depending on how you do, your numbers will be ranked in the state of Missouri in the USPA organization. But one of the things we want to do is host a lot more sort of like backlot barbecue challenges, fun sort of things for our clients that don't want to, get up on a platform in a singlet and squat, because that's a whole thing in and of itself.
Which Nick may want to. Nick would be a good, I think he'd be a good candidate for your internship. We've talked a little bit.
Love to talk to
Westside Barbell, and we talk a little Batman and Superman too. So he's
sounds like a good guy already.
Oh yeah, so yeah, absolutely. I tell you what, I think it's about 10:54, and I gotta zoom with a couple students in a little bit. So thank you so much, and Megan and Alex. So thank you so much for stopping by and saying hello.
Yes, thank you. I really apprappreciate that.
For the boss and the husband. But
if any of these guys have any questions, feel free to give them my email. I'd be happy to talk with them. If they want, they're welcome to come by and check out the gym. We're always open here. So
I will. And we always talk about that as far as observation hours go, because it's tough to get into Athletico and Apex right now. But as far as kind of coming in and just shooting the breeze a little bit, talking a little bit, observing kind of what they do. What does it look like for a PT to open up a strength gym, like, and a strength training gym? I think it's pretty sweet as far as the model goes, but you can get observations for that as well. James can sign off a couple hours. He's still
happy to do it. We might quiz you a little bit, but that's okay.
All right. Alice, good stuff. Jalen, thank you so much. Nick, thank you. Tony, thank you. Christine, it was great seeing your name pop up here as well. So, all right.
Thank you guys for showing up and asking some questions. I appreciate that. And if you have more, send them my way.
Yep, this is awesome. All right, thanks, brother.
Great. All right, guys. Have a great day.
See you guys. See you, man.
Yep.
All right, any students still around? Again, we'll meet in person next Wednesday, November 4th, 10 a.m. Let's meet in this studio, talk a little bit. I'm going to shoot out an announcement or two between now and then. But that was good, I think, as far as talking business, talking a little bit about PT, gym ownership. And so kind of come up with some questions, ask if you, or jot down a few questions. If you're going to go into physical therapy, the difference between insurance-based physical therapy or cash-based, if you have questions about that, we can forward them to James. I can talk to you a little bit about that as well, with my experience as far as being a cash-based trainer and coach. But all right. Otherwise, enjoy your day, enjoy your week, and I'll see you next week. See y'all.